It was a bright, sunny afternoon when she decided to meet her friends for lunch at one of the city's most luxurious restaurants. The kind of place where the waiters wore crisp uniforms, the tables were covered with spotless white linen, and the chandeliers sparkled like tiny stars above every guest. People came here not just for the food, but for the experience, the way it made them feel special, important, almost untouchable. She had been to places like this before. In fact, she had grown up visiting the finest hotels, the most exclusive parties, and always being surrounded by comfort and luxury. But even among all the wealth she had known, this restaurant had a certain charm that made her feel different, excited, maybe even a little superior. When they arrived, she noticed the small details immediately. The soft lighting, the polished floors, the gentle hum of conversation, all of it perfectly orchestrated. A waiter approached their table with a polite smile, holding menus in his hands. He was young, maybe in his early 20s, nervous but eager to provide the best service. There was something endearing about his careful attention, the way he adjusted his posture, and the way he spoke softly to avoid disturbing the quiet elegance of the place. She looked at him, slightly amused, and could already feel the superiority creeping in. "I hope they're good here," one of her friends whispered. She smirked, replying quietly but with an edge. "If not, we'll make sure they remember us." It wasn't really about the food or the service, it was about the feeling of power, the subtle thrill of having influence over someone who had to serve you. The waiter carefully took their orders, writing everything down on a small notepad. He tried his best to remember each person's preferences, making little suggestions here and there. When he repeated the order to confirm, he stumbled over one dish. It was a minor mistake, a mispronunciation barely noticeable, but to her it was like a crack in his otherwise polished performance. She couldn't help herself. The words came out sharp, louder than necessary. She laughed, not in a friendly way, but in a mocking tone, pointing it out in front of everyone at the table. Her friends laughed too, the sound light but uneasy, like they weren't sure if they should really be enjoying it. The waiter's face went pale. He tried to smile politely, but the embarrassment was obvious. His hand shook slightly as he moved to leave, and she realized for a moment that she had crossed a line. But instead of feeling guilty, she felt a strange rush. The power of making someone so visibly uncomfortable, of reminding them who she thought she was in the world, was intoxicating. Other diners noticed the interaction. Some frowned discreetly, some looked away, pretending not to see. A few whispered among themselves, but she didn't care. In that moment, she was completely absorbed in herself, in the way the scene unfolded like a tiny play where she was the star. The waiter returned quickly, trying to correct his mistake, bringing the food to the table with professional calm, but the tension lingered. She continued to comment on the service quietly to her friends, giggling, noting the smallest imperfections as if cataloging them. It wasn't just about the mistake itself, it was about her sense of entitlement. She had grown up in a world where people listened when she spoke, where mistakes by others were often met with correction or even dismissal. Life had always moved around her, adjusting to her needs, and she had never really experienced being on the other side of such a simple exchange. This waiter, however, was just an ordinary person, trying to do his job, and that made him an easy target. She didn't see him as a human being, really, at least not at first. He was just someone performing a role, someone whose purpose in that moment seemed to exist solely for her amusement. After a while, the food arrived, perfectly plated, steaming and aromatic. Normally, that would have been enough to calm her irritation or redirect her attention, but her mood had shifted. She was now critiquing the way the food was served, how the utensils were arranged, how the tablecloth had a tiny crease. She made jokes about it, laughing with her friends, enjoying their shared amusement, feeling the warmth of attention and the power of her observations. Each small comment seemed to emphasize the gap between her world and the waiter's, reinforcing her belief in her own importance. The waiter moved between tables with quiet efficiency, trying to remain polite, offering water refills and checking on other diners. She watched him closely, almost studying him, noting how flustered he seemed when he walked past. There was a strange mix of fascination and superiority in her gaze. On one hand, she admired that he was trying his best under pressure. On the other hand, she couldn't resist highlighting every tiny imperfection. It was a performance in a way, a dance between them, though only she was fully aware of the rules she was setting. Her friends eventually noticed the shift in the atmosphere. "Maybe you're being a little harsh," one of them suggested gently, trying to deflate the tension. She waved them off with a laugh, brushing it aside. "I'm just having fun," she said. But there was an edge in her tone that suggested it was more than fun. It was a way of asserting herself in a world where she was used to being noticed, admired, and taken seriously. As the meal continued, she felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Satisfaction from the attention, from the control she had exerted, from the subtle thrill of seeing someone squirm under her gaze. Unease because deep down she could sense the fragility of it all. The waiter was just one person, and her friend's laughter wasn't quite enough to fill the gap of something unspoken. She pushed the feeling away, focusing instead on her plate, the music playing softly in the background, and the laughter of her friends as they shared stories and jokes. She didn't notice that a few tables over, a couple of older diners had exchanged glances. They weren't angry exactly, just disappointed. In a place where manners and respect were valued as much as the food, her behavior stood out. Yet in her world, this didn't matter. What mattered was her own amusement, the sense of superiority, the little victory she felt in dominating a minor interaction. It was a lesson in power, in status, in the invisible hierarchy she had learned to navigate since childhood. When the waiter returned to clear the plates, she made one last comment, a teasing remark about the way he carried the tray. He smiled politely, nodded, and said nothing, hiding the mix of embarrassment and frustration that ran through him. He was good at his job, and part of his training was to remain professional no matter what, but she didn't know that. To her, the silence felt like acknowledgement of her dominance, and she laughed quietly with her friends, feeling the warmth of superiority wash over her. By the time the meal ended, she was relaxed again, feeling the rush of power fading into satisfaction. The waiter, professional as ever, gave them the check with a quiet smile. She signed it, leaving a generous tip, but there was a subtle undertone of condescension in the gesture. It wasn't cruelty exactly, it was a message, a reminder of her place in the world as she saw it. As they left the restaurant, stepping back into the warm sunlight, she felt a mix of triumph and unease, though she didn't know how to name it. The city was alive around them, and she felt at home in its energy, confident in her sense of entitlement, yet unknowingly brushing against the first hint of a lesson she hadn't yet learned. It was a moment that, in hindsight, would mark the beginning of a journey she hadn't expected, a journey about respect, humility, and the true meaning of privilege. But in that bright afternoon, she didn't know it. All she knew was the thrill of the moment, the laughter of her friends, and the quiet, almost imperceptible hum of life moving around her, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The drive home was quiet at first. She leaned back in the plush leather seat of the car, feeling the sunlight streaming through the windows and warming her face. Her friends were chatting softly about random things, but she hardly listened. Her mind kept replaying the restaurant scene over and over, the waiter's nervous smile, the way he had almost stumbled, and how easily she had made him uncomfortable. In a way, it had been thrilling, but there was also a strange, tiny edge of guilt gnawing at the back of her mind, though she didn't want to admit it. Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. It was her father. Seeing his name on the screen made her roll her eyes. He had always been serious, always talking about responsibility, manners, and behaving properly. Right now, she didn't want that lecture. She swiped to answer, keeping her voice light. "Hey," she said casually, almost too casually. Her father's voice was calm, measured, but there was something in it that immediately made her straighten up in the seat. "I heard about lunch today," he said. That short sentence made her stomach tighten a little. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold her directly, but there was a weight to his words. "Oh, that," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "It was nothing, really. Just a little joke with the waiter." She laughed lightly, hoping to brush it off. Her father didn't laugh. Instead, he asked simply, "A little joke at whose expense?" She felt her smile falter. "Well, you know," he made a small mistake, and I just pointed it out. "Everyone makes mistakes." "True," he said, and there was a pause. "But the way you treated him, was it fair? Was it kind?" She opened her mouth to reply, but found herself thinking. Kind, fair. She had never really thought of her words that way. In her world, it wasn't about kindness. It was about being noticed, being right, being in control. Yet even as she thought it, there was a small uncomfortable realization that maybe, just maybe, she had gone too far. Her father continued gently but firmly. Wealth and comfort can give you many things, but they don't give you the right to make someone else feel small. Respect isn't bought. It's earned. Remember that. She laughed nervously, not sure how to respond. I wasn't trying to hurt him. It was just a joke, she said. Intentions don't always match impact, he said. You can think it's a joke, but it may have left a mark on him. Think about that. She shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of how uncomfortable she felt. The power she had felt in the restaurant now seemed a little hollow, a little empty. Her father's words had a way of cutting through her excitement, like a mirror held up to something she didn't want to see. She tried to focus on the passing buildings, the sunlight bouncing off the glass windows, the familiar streets of her city, but even they seemed to lose their charm under the weight of what he was saying. Look, he said after a pause, I'm not trying to punish you. I just want you to think. Being born into wealth can make life easier, yes, but it doesn't define you. How you treat others does. That is what people will remember long after the Rolls-Royces, the vacations, the parties. Don't forget that. She looked out the window, quiet now. She didn't want to admit it, but a small part of her felt guilty. She thought about the waiter, about how nervous he had been, about the way he had smiled politely even though he had probably wanted to run away from the embarrassment. She thought about the people at other tables who had glanced over, frowning or whispering. She had felt proud in that moment, but now in her father's calm voice she realized that pride had been built on someone else's discomfort. When she arrived home, the house was quiet. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the kind of calm that seemed to hold space for reflection. Her father was waiting in the living room, as he often was when he wanted to talk seriously. He wasn't angry. Not at all. But he had that look, the one that always made her pay attention. A mix of patience, expectation, and quiet authority. Sit down, he said, motioning to the sofa across from him. She obeyed, feeling a strange mixture of annoyance and curiosity. He handed her a small envelope. What's this? She asked, taking it carefully, half expecting it to be a bill, half expecting it to be some kind of lecture in paper form. Open it, he said. Inside was a note, written neatly in his handwriting. It read, Character is your true inheritance. Treat people with respect and you will be remembered for something that money cannot buy. She frowned slightly. It sounded serious. She had grown up with notes like this before, quotes, advice, reminders, but this one felt different. It wasn't about rules or schedules. It was about her behavior, about the choices she made in everyday life. She looked up at him, waiting for him to say more. Alongside the note were keys, a set of shiny keys, elegant and heavy in her hand. She lifted them and her heart skipped a beat. They were the keys to a brand new Rolls-Royce. She couldn't help smiling. The car was beautiful, sleek, perfect in every way. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, something only a privileged few could have. Her father watched her carefully. Luxury is yours, he said softly, but humility is something you must earn on your own. The world will notice your wealth, but only your character will make people respect you. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to celebrate, to jump into the excitement of a new car, to forget everything her father had said. But another part, a quieter part, lingered in her mind. The part that had felt a little guilty about the waiter, a little uncomfortable with the laughter she had stirred. She didn't answer immediately. She just turned the keys in her hand, feeling the weight of them. It wasn't just metal and electronics, it was a reminder in a strange way of responsibility. She had everything she could want in material terms. But what she didn't yet fully understand was that there were lessons no money could buy. Lessons that would shape her life more than any luxury ever could. Her father spoke again, his voice calm but firm. You are not defined by what you own. You are defined by how you treat others when no one is watching, how you respond when someone is vulnerable, and how you act when you have the power to do whatever you want. Remember that today. She nodded slowly, almost reluctantly, feeling a mixture of defiance and realization. She wanted to feel free, to focus on the excitement of the car, the thrill of wealth. But somewhere deep down she sensed that today had been a turning point. The incident at the restaurant, the conversation with her father, the note, the keys, they were all pieces of something bigger. A lesson she had to learn the hard way, that being wealthy did not mean being better, and that true respect could not be bought. For the rest of the evening, she couldn't stop thinking about the waiter. She replayed the scene again, noticing things she hadn't before. The nervous way he had carried the tray, the slight tremor in his hands, the polite tone that masked discomfort. She realized that her laughter had not been harmless. It had been an assertion of power she didn't fully understand, and that thought made her uneasy. Her friends called later, excited about the new car. "You'll love it," they said. "We need to go for a ride." She smiled, but her excitement was muted. She thought about the day, about her father's words, and about how easily she had hurt someone without even trying. She realized that fun didn't have to come at someone else's expense, and for the first time, she wondered how different things could be if she treated people with more care and attention. That night, she went to bed feeling restless. The house was quiet, the city lights twinkling outside the window. The new car sat gleaming in the driveway, a symbol of everything she had and everything she could have. But she understood, in a way she hadn't before, that it was not just a symbol of wealth. It was a reminder of responsibility. The next morning, she woke up thinking about the waiter again. Not with mockery, not with superiority, but with a strange sense of empathy she hadn't felt before. She realized that her father had been right. Wealth could give her comfort and opportunities, but respect, kindness, and character were earned every single day, in every interaction, no matter how small. She didn't know what she would do next, or how she would change, but she felt the first stirrings of something new, a desire to notice people, to understand them, to act with consideration rather than entitlement. It wasn't a lesson that would happen all at once. It wasn't something she could check off like a task. But it was the beginning of a journey, one that could shape her life far more deeply than any car, party, or luxury ever could. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something stronger than excitement. She felt responsibility. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to spill golden light across the room, and the house was still quiet, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Usually mornings were a blur of rushing, scrolling through social media and getting ready without much thought. But today was different. The events of the previous day, the restaurant, the waiter, the conversation with her father, the note, and the keys, kept replaying in her mind like a loop she couldn't escape. She lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of excitement and unease. She was excited because she had a brand new car waiting for her, something many people only dreamed of. But she felt uneasy because she couldn't shake the memory of how she had treated the waiter. She hadn't realized it at first, but as she thought about it, she could feel the sting of guilt creeping in. The laughter she had shared with her friends now seemed hollow, and she wondered if she had ever really considered the waiter as a human being with feelings. Finally, she got out of bed and moved toward the window. The city below was waking up. Cars honked softly in the distance. People hurried along the sidewalks, and the hum of life carried on as if nothing had happened. She thought about her own life, her comfort, and the privileges she had always taken for granted. She realized that she had never really thought about how her actions affected others, especially those who worked in service or in positions that required patience and humility. The new Rolls-Royce keys lay on the dresser, gleaming in the morning light. She picked them up, turning them over in her hands. For a moment, she imagined herself getting into the car, driving it down the wide, smooth streets, feeling the soft leather beneath her hands, and listening to the quiet hum of the engine. It was tempting to ignore everything else, to focus only on the thrill of luxury, but another thought surfaced, one that was harder to push away. What if she could use this opportunity not just for herself, but to become someone better? She dressed quickly and went downstairs. Her father was in the study, as he often was in the mornings, going through papers and making notes. He looked up when she entered, offering a small smile. "Morning," he said, not questioning her sudden seriousness, but sensing that something had shifted. "Morning," she replied quietly. For once there was no teasing, no laughter, no casual dismissal, just a sense of curiosity and attention. Her father gestured toward the door. "You're planning to take the car out today?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, but I want to do something different first," she admitted. He raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. I want to pay attention to people today." I want to notice them. I don't know how, but I want to start. Her father's smile widened slightly. Good, that's a start. Notice, respect, and learn. The rest will come naturally. She left the house and stepped into the driveway. The Rolls-Royce was even more stunning in daylight. Its sleek curves gleamed in the sun, and the paint shimmered with a mirror-like shine. She touched the hood lightly, feeling a mixture of pride and responsibility. She had been given something extraordinary, but it felt like a test in a way she didn't fully understand yet. It was a reminder that privilege carried expectations, that power could be used for good or selfishness. Instead of speeding off toward the city, she decided to take a slower approach. She drove through quieter streets, observing the people around her. There were street vendors setting up their stalls, office workers hurrying to begin their day, and children playing in small parks along the sidewalks. She noticed how each person carried themselves, how their expressions told stories of hope, struggle, and determination. At one small cafe, she stopped to grab a coffee. The barista greeted her with a warm smile, and she realized she had been so focused on herself that she had rarely noticed the effort of others in simple moments like this. She smiled back, not in a polite, automatic way, but with genuine warmth.
"Thank you," she said as she received her cup.
She felt a small spark of satisfaction, different from the thrill of luxury. It was quiet, subtle, but it mattered. As she continued driving, she started to pay attention to the little things she had never noticed before. The way a delivery person balanced packages on a trolley, the way a janitor quietly swept the sidewalk without anyone acknowledging him, the way a nurse waved to patients as she walked by a clinic. Each moment reminded her that life wasn't just about wealth or status. It was about the small interactions, the kindness shown, and the respect given to those who often went unnoticed. By midday, she found herself near a local school. Children were running in the playground, laughing and shouting with carefree joy. She watched for a while, remembering her own childhood. She realized that she had grown up surrounded by privilege, shielded from many of life's challenges. She had been given so much, yet she had never been truly aware of what it meant to be considerate or to notice the world outside her own bubble. She parked the car near a small park and got out. For the first time in a long while, she walked without thinking about being seen or admired. She noticed the sounds of birds, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the smiles exchanged between strangers passing by. She felt a connection she hadn't felt before, a recognition that everyone had a story. Everyone had struggles, and everyone deserved respect, regardless of who they were or what they could offer her. Later, she decided to return to the restaurant from the day before, not because she wanted to relive the moment, but because she wanted to make amends in a small way. She entered quietly, hoping that the waiter would remember her. She found him behind the counter, organizing menus and helping other customers. He looked up when she approached, and for a moment there was a flash of recognition in his eyes. I just wanted to apologize," she said, softly, sincerely, "about yesterday. I wasn't kind, and I'm sorry." The waiter's expression softened. He nodded, a small smile forming. "Thank you," he said. "I appreciate that." She left the restaurant feeling lighter than she had in a long time. It wasn't the thrill of being noticed or admired, but something quieter, deeper, and more satisfying. She realized that respect, kindness, and empathy were things she could practice every day in small ways, and that they mattered more than any luxury she could possess. Driving back, she thought about her father's words again. Character is your true inheritance. She finally understood what he meant. Money could buy comfort, security, and admiration for a time, but only her actions, her choices, and the way she treated others would define who she truly was. For the rest of the day, she continued noticing the people around her, the street cleaners, the bus drivers, the shopkeepers, even the security guards at the malls. She began small acts of kindness, like offering compliments, thanking people for their work, or simply smiling at them. Each action felt like a small seed planted in her mind, growing slowly, teaching her a new way of seeing the world. By evening, she returned home, tired but satisfied. The Rolls-Royce sat quietly in the driveway, a symbol of luxury, yes, but also of responsibility and choice. She realized that the car, the wealth, and the privileges she had were tools, not definitions of who she was. How she used them and how she treated others along the way was what mattered most. Sitting in her room that night, she reflected on the day. She had taken small steps, but they were steps nonetheless. She had begun to see life differently, to notice people and their struggles. and to act with a sense of empathy she had never known before. She understood now that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Old habits, entitlement, and pride could easily creep back. But she also felt hope that she could become someone better, someone who used her privilege to lift others rather than put them down. She looked at the note from her father again, placing it carefully on her nightstand. "Character is your true inheritance." She whispered the words to herself, letting them sink in. For the first time, they didn't feel like advice or a lecture. They felt like a guide, a map, and a challenge all at once. That night, she went to sleep with a strange, peaceful feeling. She had begun a journey of awareness, empathy, and change. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew it was worth following. She had tasted the hollow thrill of power and superiority, and she now understood that true fulfillment came from kindness, respect, and genuine connection with others. And in that quiet room, as the city outside slowly settled into the night, she felt the first real stirrings of a change that could shape her life forever. The next morning, she woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. The events of the previous days, the incident at the restaurant, the conversation with her father, the first attempts at noticing and respecting people, had begun to change her in ways she didn't fully understand yet. It wasn't about the car, the luxury, or even her father's words. It was about something deeper, a desire to be better, to grow, and to act with awareness. She made herself a simple breakfast and ate slowly, savoring each bite, thinking about the day ahead. Usually, mornings were rushed, filled with checking messages, scrolling social media, and planning activities that mostly revolved around fun or shopping. But today she wanted to do something different. She wanted to spend the day paying attention, helping and observing. Not because anyone would notice or praise her, but because she wanted to feel it herself. After breakfast, she dressed casually and stepped outside. The Rolls-Royce keys glinted in the sunlight, and for a moment she felt a thrill of excitement. But she didn't jump into the car immediately. Instead, she walked slowly along the quiet street in front of her house, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up. Birds chirped in the trees. The distant hum of traffic began to rise, and she could hear the laughter of children playing in a nearby park. It was ordinary, simple, and yet it felt special in a way she hadn't noticed before. She decided to start the day at a local community center. It was a place she had passed by countless times, but never really paid attention to. Today, she wanted to see the people there, to understand what they did and how she could help, even in a small way. As she entered, she was greeted by volunteers setting up for various activities: food distribution, tutoring, and recreational games for children. She realized that these people dedicated their time and effort for the benefit of others, without expecting anything in return. It was inspiring. "Good morning," she said quietly to one of the volunteers. "Good morning," the volunteer replied warmly. "Would you like to help?" She nodded, unsure exactly what to do but willing to learn. She started with simple tasks, arranging books, sorting supplies, and handing out materials. At first she felt clumsy and awkward. Her hands weren't used to the work and she stumbled a few times, but the people around her were patient, smiling and guiding her gently. She realized that she had been so used to being waited on and having tasks done for her, that she had never learned the value of working with others, of contributing without expecting praise. As the morning passed, she noticed the children arriving for tutoring. They were bright, curious, and full of energy. One boy struggled with reading and she sat beside him trying to help. At first he was hesitant, unsure of someone so different from him, but she smiled, encouraged him, and listened carefully to his mistakes. When he finally read a passage correctly, his face lit up with pride, and she felt a warmth in her chest she had never experienced from wealth or luxury. It wasn't the thrill of owning something. It was the quiet joy of helping someone succeed. During a short break, she stepped outside to get some fresh air. The sun was high in the sky, warming her face, and she noticed the world around her with new eyes. She saw the janitors cleaning the sidewalks, the street vendors selling breakfast, and the elderly man feeding pigeons in the park. She realized that each person had a story, a struggle, and a life that mattered, even if it was invisible to most people passing by. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Character is your true inheritance." She began to understand what he meant. After lunch, she decided to take the car for a short drive, not to show off or seek attention, but as a reward for herself a reminder that while she had privilege, it didn't define her actions. She drove slowly through the city, observing people from a distance, noticing details she had never paid attention to before. She watched a bus driver helping an elderly woman board, a young man carrying groceries for a neighbor, and a woman patiently teaching a child how to tie shoelaces. Each act of kindness, each small gesture, made her reflect on her own behavior and how she could do better. She stopped at a small park where children were playing soccer. One of the children kicked the ball too hard and it rolled toward her. She picked it up and handed it back, smiling. "Good game," she said softly. The children laughed and waved, and she felt a simple joy that had nothing to do with money or status. It was pure, honest, and fulfilling. The afternoon brought her to a different part of the city, one she rarely visited. It was a neighborhood with smaller shops, narrow streets, and people who lived more modestly. She noticed a man struggling to fix a broken fence outside his house. She got out of the car and offered to help. At first he looked surprised, perhaps because someone so young and wealthy didn't usually offer assistance. But she didn't hesitate. Together they managed to fix the fence. He thanked her sincerely, and she realized that the gratitude she felt wasn't just about the fence, it was about connection, about being part of someone's life, even briefly. Later, she visited a small bakery she had always admired from afar. The baker was kneading dough, his hands covered in flour. She watched quietly for a moment, fascinated by the skill and dedication it took to do his work every day. She struck up a conversation, asking about his business, his challenges, and his dreams. He spoke candidly, and she listened carefully, realizing how little she knew about the lives of ordinary people. She even helped package some bread for customers, laughing at her clumsiness but enjoying the experience nonetheless. As evening approached, she returned home, feeling exhausted but fulfilled. The car in the driveway gleamed under the fading sunlight, a reminder of her privileges, but also of the choices she had made today. She had spent the day noticing, helping, and connecting with people, and for the first time, she felt that her life had more depth than she had ever imagined. Her father was waiting in the living room when she arrived. He looked up from his papers and smiled knowingly. "How was your day?" he asked. She sat down and recounted everything she had done: the community center, helping the children, the man with the fence, the bakery. As she spoke, she realized how much she had learned about herself, about her assumptions, and about the impact of small actions. Her father listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he said, "I am proud of you. Today you began to understand that wealth is not a measure of a person's worth. Respect, empathy, and kindness are what truly matter. These are the things that will make you a person others admire, not because of what you own, but because of who you are." She smiled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. For the first time, she understood that her father's lessons were not rules or restrictions. They were opportunities to grow, to be better, and to live a life of meaning. That night, she reflected on the day. She realized that true change was not instantaneous. It wasn't about a single act of kindness or a single lesson learned. It was about consistency, about noticing the world and people around her and making small, meaningful choices every day. She understood that she had a long way to go, that her previous behavior had been shaped by entitlement and thoughtlessness. But she also felt hope. Hope that she could become someone who used her privilege responsibly and with care. Before going to sleep, she placed the note from her father beside her bed again. She read it one more time. "Character is your true inheritance." She whispered the words to herself, feeling their weight and truth. She understood now that the journey ahead would not be easy, but it would be worthwhile. Each day, each choice, each small act of consideration could shape her into the person she wanted to be. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of calm. She had begun to see the world differently, to notice the lives of others and to act with thoughtfulness and empathy. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to practice what she had learned, and new moments to make a difference, however small. And for the first time, she didn't just see herself as a wealthy young woman with a luxurious car. She saw herself as someone capable of growth, someone capable of change, and someone who could build a life of true meaning. The days that followed felt almost surreal. The house, once filled with quiet tension and anxiety, now hummed with laughter, chatter, and the lively sounds of a boy rediscovering life. Ethan's energy seemed endless. His curiosity insatiable and his spirit, once fragile, now radiated a sense of joy that touched everyone around him. The father watched him closely, still astonished at the transformation. Every morning he would check on Ethan, noticing how strong and vibrant he had become. It was not just a physical change, though that was remarkable. It was the glow of confidence and contentment that shone from within. Every smile, every giggle, every small triumph reminded the father of the journey they had endured together. The nights of worry, the long hours at the market, the patient guidance of the old woman, and the meals that had once seemed simple but had carried the weight of love and trust. One morning, as they walked to the market together, Ethan ran ahead, laughing freely, while the father trailed behind, smiling quietly to himself. The old woman greeted them warmly, her eyes reflecting calm pride. "You have both done well," she said softly. "Healing is complete not only because your son has regained his strength, but because you have learned what it means to care, to trust, and to be present." The father nodded, a lump rising in his throat. It had been a long, uncertain path. He had doubted, feared, and questioned every step. But now he understood that every challenge, every moment of discomfort, had been a lesson, and those lessons had not only healed his son, they had healed him. As they shared breakfast, the father noticed the quiet confidence in Ethan's eyes. The boy moved with ease, ate with joy, and even took small steps to help prepare the meal. "Look, Dad," he said, "I can do it by myself." The father's heart swelled. It was more than a simple action. It was a symbol of progress, independence, and growth. He realized that healing was never about instant perfection. It was about small, consistent steps, about allowing the person to regain not just health, but dignity, hope, and a sense of agency in their own life. After breakfast, the old woman spoke again. "Your journey together is far from over, but you have reached a turning point. Remember this: healing is not something you finish. It is something you live. Every act of care, every moment of patience, every choice to trust will continue to shape your lives and your son's future." The father absorbed her words, feeling the weight and truth of them. He had learned that life would always present challenges, uncertainties, and moments of fear. But he had also learned that love, patience, and presence could create change in ways that medicine alone could never achieve. That understanding brought a quiet strength that settled deep in his chest, a strength that would carry him through whatever life placed before them. Back at home, the father and Ethan spent the day exploring the small joys of everyday life. They played together in the yard, ran errands, and even tried a few new activities the boy had been hesitant to attempt before. Each success, each laugh, each spark of curiosity reinforced the father's growing confidence that his son's healing was real and lasting. Even in moments of quiet, he found a new appreciation for life. Watching Ethan draw with crayons, building small towers with blocks, or asking endless questions about the world, he realized that the simple acts of attention, love, and care had restored something deeper than physical health. They had restored the essence of childhood, a joy that he feared might have been lost forever. As the days turned into weeks, the father also noticed the impact of this journey on himself. He was calmer, more patient, and more appreciative of the small, ordinary moments that life offered. The fear and anxiety that had once dominated his thoughts had been replaced by a steady hope, a quiet confidence, and a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. He understood that caring for someone else could transform not only the recipient, but the giver as well. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with hues of gold and pink, the father and Ethan sat together outside. Ethan leaned against him, tired but happy after a long day of play. "Dad," the boy whispered, "I'm glad you didn't give up on me." The father's throat tightened and he hugged him gently. "I could never give up on you," he said softly. "Not now, not ever." In that quiet moment, he realized something profound. The journey had not just been about healing his son's body, it had been about healing their bond, their trust, and their ability to face life together. Every small act of care, every moment of patience, every ounce of love they had poured into this journey had created something greater than either of them could have imagined. The old woman's words echoed in his mind. Healing is something you live. He understood now that they had not just recovered from illness. They had learned a way of living that was richer, more patient, and more compassionate. Over the following weeks, they continued to nurture this new rhythm of life. Ethan became more independent, taking initiative in small tasks, helping around the house, and even exploring new hobbies. The father, too, embraced this change, allowing his son more freedom while still providing guidance and support. They were partners in this journey, walking together through the ordinary moments of life that had once seemed impossible to enjoy. One day, as they sat sharing a meal with the old woman for the last time before she returned to her quiet home, she smiled at them both. "You have learned the most important lesson," she said, "that love, care, patience, and trust are the forces that create lasting change. You have not just healed a body, you have healed a life." The father looked at Ethan, who was now eating happily and chatting freely, his eyes bright with curiosity and joy. "Thank you," he said quietly, addressing both the old woman and the invisible force that had guided them through this journey. "I don't know how to thank you enough," the old woman shook her head gently. "The thanks are not mine. The change was made by your dedication, your patience, and your love. You gave your son what he needed most: presence, care, and trust. That is all that matters." When they returned home that evening, the father felt a deep sense of closure, not just for the journey itself, but for the fears, doubts, and sleepless nights that had accompanied it. He knew that life would still hold challenges, but he also knew that they now had the tools, the understanding, and the bond to face them together. As he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy looked up at him with a sleepy smile. "I feel really good now, Dad," he whispered. "I feel strong." The father kissed his forehead and whispered back, "Yes, you are strong. Stronger than you know." He sat quietly for a while, watching his son sleep, marveling at how far they had come. Every moment of struggle, every ounce of fear, and every act of care had brought them here, to a place of hope, trust, and healing that felt both miraculous and natural. Over the following months, Ethan continued to thrive. The routine of daily care, attention, and trust had been internalized, becoming a natural part of their lives. He laughed, played, explored, and learned with the confidence and energy that only a child fully healed in body, mind, and spirit could possess. The father, too, carried the lessons of this journey into his own life. He approached challenges with patience, uncertainty with calm, and relationships with a deeper understanding of presence and trust. The experience had transformed him, revealing the quiet power of consistent care and unwavering love. One sunny afternoon, as they walked through the park, Ethan ran ahead, calling back, "Look, Dad, I can do this!" He climbed a small hill and waved triumphantly. The father laughed and clapped, feeling the warmth of pride and gratitude fill him completely. In that moment, he realized that the journey had always been about more than just healing his son. It had been about discovering the strength of love, the importance of trust, and the extraordinary impact of presence and patience. And most of all, it had been about learning that ordinary acts, performed with care and consistency, could create miracles in the most human and profound ways. That night, as they sat together reading a story before bed, the father felt a profound peace settle within him. Ethan's laughter echoed softly through the room, and the simple rhythm of life, the meals, the play, the conversations, the quiet moments, felt like a celebration of everything they had endured and everything they had achieved. The old woman's final words lingered in his mind. "Healing is something you live." And he understood now that this was the truest lesson of all. They had lived it together, step by step, moment by moment, and it had changed everything. As he turned off the light and watched Ethan drift into a peaceful sleep, the father whispered quietly, "We did it, buddy. We really did it." Outside, the world continued as it always had, but inside their home, a quiet miracle had taken place. The boy was whole again, not just in body, but in spirit. And the father had discovered a new depth of love, patience, and understanding that would guide them both for the rest of their lives. In the end, it was not magic, medicine, or chance that had brought them here. It was the simple, powerful truth of human care: love, attention, patience, and trust. And with that, a life once shadowed by fear and uncertainty had been transformed into one filled with hope, joy, and endless possibility.